Hey guys, welcome to FunNGun. I'm going to go ahead and say that you probably already know from the title of this video what particular frame I chose to go with Project Warhawk here. And well, if you guessed the ZEV OZ9 frame, you would be right. This is the Blim version of the frame. It was actually on sale at the time of filming this video for $200. They're usually $225, and you can actually pick the full ready to go drop-in frame up for $400 currently, and it's usually $525. And if you're like me, you didn't even know this was an option until doing a little bit of research, so that is why I chose to do this. And I would say this is going to be one of the first builds on YouTube to do this. I have seen one other video of a guy talking about using the ZEV frame, and so there are not a whole lot of videos out there of this. So let's go ahead and open up the box, see what you get here. So, like I said, this is the Blim version, and you get your user's manual. I'm just going to go ahead and set that off to the side for now with the box, and you're going to get the two pins you need to assemble this. You're going to get the one for your trigger and the one for your trigger pack back here in the rear, and you do get a slide locking lever, as they call it. And I will say I made the mistake of thinking it actually come with a slide lock lever, because that's what they call this particular part. I always refer to this as the takedown lever. So going to be using a factory Glock one for the time being until I get around to replacing it with the one similar to the one on my 17L here. So that is what's going to be used for that part. So just forgot to throw that in there. When you order the Blim version, you do not get that. And if you order the non-Blim version, you will get a full ZEV trigger pack. And I did choose to go another route on the trigger as well. I'll get into that in just a second. So let's go ahead and talk about why this is considered a Blim frame. The only thing I could find on this frame is right here next to your takedown lever on both sides. There's a couple of little black Sharpie marks, like somebody covered up a few little scratches on there. And other than that, this frame looked perfect when I took it out of the box. The only Blim on the frame now is where I actually dinged it myself, sadly. So I really like a good Blim deal, and I'm pretty happy with this so far. So let's go ahead and get into a few more parts going to be going into this particular gun here. Let's see. Like I mentioned before, you will have to pick up a trigger pack part of the gun here. So you're going to need this to assemble. It's also got your your ejector already mounted into it. So you're going to need that part. It drops in right here, and one of the two pins will hold that in place. I just went ahead and picked up the ZEV one. When I ordered the frame, it was like $12. Figured that's about what price all of them was. Might as well use the one that I know is going to fit in there properly. So that's what I did. So altogether, I believe with tax and shipping, I paid $300, right around that, for this. They do charge you a premium for shipping because it is considered a handgun. It's like $72 to ship this. Kind of disappointed with that, but it is what it is. We got our frame and our trigger pack part there, and let's go ahead and end up picking we got the grip here from ZEV as well. This is the X style, like a 19X or a 45. This is actually the compact frame. They do offer this with the full size as well. But when you get the compact version, you do have the option of putting a full-size grip on it and using a 17 Glock magazine, versus if you use the compact one, you'll be stuck with, well, you're not stuck with, you'll be using a Glock 19 magazine to get a flush fit. Now, if you get the full-size version of the frame, you're stuck with the 17 size grip. There is no option to go smaller, so that's just something I figured I'd point out. You also get your pin that goes into the front here to lock this grip onto the gun when you assemble this. Set that off the side there. Let's go ahead and show you how that clicks in. You just got a little tab on the back that locks into the back of the grip. It just pushes down in there, and you're going to put your pin in. I'm not going to do that right now because I'm going to have to assemble this in just a second. So that is the grip I chose to go with. I went with the gray because the gray goes pretty well with this here slide. Pretty cool looking, in my opinion. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not 100% sure this is gonna be the grip that stays on this gun for the entirety of me owning this, because if you've watched any of my other videos, I don't have just huge hands, and it's a pretty comfortable grip, but it is a little large. So there is something else that I found out that they make that I will more than likely end up going with at some point when they're more relatively available, which was the Icarus Precision frame. Just think that's a really cool looking frame, and I figured if I picked up that in aluminum, I could go ahead and take it and have someone Cerakote it to match the frame. I mean the slide here. Figured that'd actually be pretty cool. So that is something that will probably happen in the future with this build. I'll go ahead and make a video on that when we get around to doing that at some point. Just figured I'd go ahead and mention that. So let's go ahead and get into a few more parts here we're going to use. Let's go ahead and get into the trigger here. We're going to bring in the connector pin or bars I decided to go with here, and I'll get into that in just a second. The trigger we're going to be using in this is the Alpha trigger from Timney for the Glock Gen 3 and Gen 4. This is a Gen 3 frame. It does have a little bit of Gen 4 to it. You do get a Gen 4 safety with the OZ9. But the reason I chose to go with this trigger, I'm going to go ahead and show you this particular gun is unloaded. I have this particular trigger in my 17L here. And that is also the disconnector that's in this gun as well, or the connector they call it here. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how this trigger is set up in this particular gun. You just got a little bit of take up there and a nice break and a nice reset as well. So that is why I chose to go with this particular connector. I'm going to go ahead and set this 17L back out of the way, and we'll talk about this a little bit more. This was actually kind of a little bit of a funny thing how I come across the fact that the Timney trigger feels good with this particular connector here. You do get quite a few connectors here because I did buy the 3-pack, but this is the version of the connector I'm actually going to use in the gun. It's the same one that's in that, and I actually bought this Glock used and didn't know it, but it had this connector already in it, and that's how I found out it works good with that trigger. And if you also watched the video for the part that Timney, not Timney, yeah, it was Timney, I take that back, was actually originally offering like an improvement kit that come with a striker and a connector. This is the connector that was in that kit as well. Found that out after I found out this is the one I had. But in this kit, you get 3 different versions of the connector from Wolf. Let's see here which versions you get here. I think this is the classic, the Target, and then the regular. They're all 3.5 connectors, but this is the connector I will use in this. And you also get a 6-pound spring, which you do not use with the Timney. So we're going to go ahead and set those off to the side. And I'll take out the Timney here and look at it a little bit closer. If you haven't ever checked out the Timney trigger, it's pretty cool. It is completely different from the way a usual Glock trigger operates, as it does not actually have the crucible on the back of the trigger bar here, and it actually just rides up the little ramp there, and at the same point it pushes it down. So this gun's not going to be a carry gun, so that is not really something I'm worried about. This is more of a competition style trigger. It even says competition series on the package, so that is the reason I chose to go with this trigger. It's just going to be a fun gun. Might run in IDPA a little bit. Going to use that as a suppressor hose. So I'm going to go ahead and get all this assembled, and we'll come back and we'll look at the whole gun fully assembled here. So let's go ahead and cut right here, and I'll be right back. Okay, got our frame mostly assembled here. We got our Timney trigger in, our slide stop here. Figured I'd go ahead and show you the frame at this point right here, so I could go over a few things I had to do here to get this Timney trigger to work properly in this frame. And the number one thing being is the reset spring for your Timney trigger needs to have the ear on the top bent away from your slide stop here, because if you don't, it will slide over and pop down into the little channel that's on the frame here for your slide stop to ride up and down in, and it will not let that actuate. So I'll go ahead and insert a few pictures of that here so you can see what I'm talking about there. But other than that, another thing here is I will say, when you use the Lone Wolf Target disconnector here, or connector, you will have to adjust it to the particular settings that you're looking for. I had to bend it forward a little bit because it actually was not catching on the ramp on the back of the trigger bar early enough, and it wasn't actually letting the trigger disengage. So that is something I had to mess with a little bit. So let me go ahead and cut one more time here. We'll put the grip on this, and then we'll go ahead and assemble this thing and see what we got. Okay guys, we got our grip all mounted up to our frame here. Not gonna lie, that was a little harder than I was expecting, because this particular pin that I've seen get pushed in with your thumb in other videos was not the case for my particular gun. I ended up actually having to take a small screwdriver and put it in behind the little spring here that retains that pin to push it all the way forward out of the way. And after doing that, I went ahead and got the pin started and took a small hammer and a brass punch and went ahead and knocked that into place. Not too big of a deal because you're not going to be taking that pin out too often. I just figured I'd point that out that you may not get one that just pops right in. Another thing I noticed here is I currently have a factory Glock slide release installed in this particular gun, and it is actually beyond flush with the frame. So if you wanted to use this to manually lock the slide open with your thumb here, it's going to be a little bit more difficult, and to drop the slide as well. So I'm actually going to go ahead and end up replacing that with a slide release slide stop more similar to the one on my 17L here. So that is something I figured I'd point out. If you're thinking you're just going to use a factory Glock slide release, it's definitely going to be quite a bit harder to use than something a little bit larger. So another thing here is I do actually have the mag well coming for this particular build here. I ended up going with the Pro version over the Pro Plus just because I didn't think I really needed the big mag well look on this particular gun, being a shorter slide and everything. I just figured the Pro version would look a little bit better. It's also a little bit cheaper, which is pretty nice. Okay, another thing here is I did mention originally that I didn't think this grip was going to fit my hand the best, but now that I actually have the trigger installed in this particular frame, my finger does land in a pretty natural position on this trigger, so that actually ended up being pretty nice. Another thing I thought was pretty cool is these little divots on both sides of the frame allow this part of your hand to just kind of nestle down into it, which is pretty nice. It gives you something to push forward into when you're gripping, and it kind of makes it a real natural feeling grip. Also like how well textured this particular grip is, not slippery at all. Not something I feel like I need to put any grip tape on anything. I do appreciate a nice textured grip, so that is pretty cool as well. Okay, I believe that's about everything. Let's go ahead and install our slide here. We'll talk a little bit more about this trigger here. Well, before we do that, let's go ahead and cover these slide rails. Versus most regular Glocks, let me go ahead and take the slide off my 17L here. And we'll do a little bit of a comparison here. As you can see on the regular Glock frame here how small the slide rails are versus the one on the ZEV frame. You get basically almost twice as much contact with the slide as you would with your regular Glock frame. And where that's going to help is it's going to keep the frame from being able to flex as much under recoil, and it just gives you an overall better slide fit. So I figured I'd go ahead and point that out before we drop the slide on here. And then also, as you'll see here, there's not a whole lot of wiggle and wobble into that, and that is because of those larger slide rails. It's also nice how the ZEV frame is a metal piece that comes all the way up to the front. You actually have a Picatinny rail on it versus just a standard Glock notch, so that opens up a lot of more opportunities to mount stuff onto the front of this particular gun, which is nice. Also gives you a little more weight up front. So let's go ahead and talk about this trigger a little bit more. Obviously this is clear, brand new gun, never been shot. We're going to show you either way, but this trigger actually, once you get the slide on it, feels a little bit better than I was expecting it to, like I was showing in the other scene there. So got a little bit of take up right there. Not really too worried about the take up. The 17L here also has some take up, but that'll actually end up being a little bit smoother on this once I get the aftermarket safety plunger into it and a lighter spring. So you got a little bit of take up, come to a nice wall. You got a real short break there and a real short reset as well. So that is currently set up with the Lone Wolf. This is the target disconnector in there, connector, whatever you want to call it, but that is the one that's in there currently. I did have to do a little adjusting on it to get this to where it was at, and you can actually also adjust your Timney trigger for pre-travel there. So that is something else I'll probably mess with a little bit and go ahead and get it all dialed in. But for now, let's go ahead and head out to the range and try this gun out, see how it functions. Hey guys, we're out here on the range with Project Warhawk. We got some magazines loaded up with some Winchester 124 grain NATO. Figure we go ahead and break it in with something a little bit hot, just to go ahead and loosen everything up. So let's run a few mags through it, see what kind of results we get here. Yep. Got our first jam right off the bat there. Okay, other than that one failure to eject of the case right there, actually ran flawless after that. So let's go ahead and run one more mag. Yep, had trouble picking up the first round on that one as well. Go ahead and get it chambered there. Okay, needs a little bit of breaking in, obviously. Just have got done putting this together. We're gonna go ahead and I'm gonna run a few more rounds through it off camera here, but so far, I'm pretty satisfied with the fact that I actually got it pretty well sighted in just by knocking this in and measuring a little bit with a set of calipers. Seems to be pretty on that. But we'll go ahead and head back into the table here and we'll talk about it a little bit more. Okay guys, back in here at the table with Project Warhawk here. And we're gonna go ahead and go over a few things that had happened while I was firing the first 100 rounds and a few things I noticed afterwards. So let's go ahead and show you that this gun is unloaded. We'll go ahead and get into that here. The first thing being is if you do decide to use a Timney trigger, you're gonna wanna put some blue Loctite on your pre-travel screw there, because if you don't, it's gonna go ahead and back out and you're gonna end up with a lot of pre-travel. So not something I was really expecting because I never had that problem with the 17L over there. So that's just something that I figured I'd go ahead and point out just in case that you're gonna wanna go ahead and put some Loctite on that. Next thing being, I thought it was pretty interesting to actually finally get to use some of this 124 grain Winchester NATO ammo in something other than my ported bull to get a little bit of a comparison in recoil, and you can definitely tell the difference in the recoil with the non-ported barrel versus the ported barrel. Thought that was pretty interesting to finally actually get a little bit of a comparison on that. I will say, I believe once I get my DPM recoil system in this gun, have a little bit more weight on the front, and I'm able to kind of dial that in a little bit more, it'll help soak some of that up. But it's really not too big of a deal. It is a 9mm, and I do plan on shooting mostly 115 grain in. Just figured I'd point that out. Thought that was kind of interesting. Next thing being is this slide stop, being a factory Glock one, is almost useless like I figured it would be, and I mentioned earlier. So it's 100% getting replaced with the same one that is in my 17L here. It's just going to be black instead of gold. So have that coming already because that's really annoying the way it is. Next thing here is, as you heard me say there a minute ago, I was actually pretty happy with the fact that these sights actually end up reasonably pretty well sighted in and actually able to hit some stuff with them. Didn't really get a chance to put them on paper, so I'm pretty excited about getting a chance to do that just to see how well I actually did get them sighted in just by putting them in there with a hammer and a caliper. So looking forward to getting to try that out at some point. So let's go ahead and talk about the few jams that you see me have there and a few jams I had and a few other issues I had after I turned the camera off. So that was actually the first two magazines fired through this gun. I didn't shoot it at all before the video. I wanted to get a raw what was going to happen with the gun on the first few rounds. And as you see on that first round, it actually did not fully eject the case. I'm going to go ahead and insert a picture from my hat cam right here where you can see exactly what that looked like. And what I believe actually caused that was the fact that, like I mentioned previously, that this frame, this slide with the Cerakote being on it, was actually a pretty tight fit, and I just don't think it had enough energy to go ahead and get the slide to cycle properly with all that drag to go ahead and hit the extractor and hit the ejector and kick that case out. But as you see in there, after I did clear that and get the mag back in there, it did run the rest of the mag just fine. Next issue you see me have there is I inserted a full mag into the gun and tried to drop the slide using the slide release there, and it would not pick the round up out of the top of the magazine. And that is something that I had happen a few times off camera as well. I ended up just starting to slingshot it and giving that extra little bit of travel in the slide, and that ended up helping with that. I do feel like once this all breaks into everything, that'll probably just go ahead and clear itself up. Now, if you're wondering what kind of magazines we were using here, is these are factory Glock magazines. They just have ghost mag bases on them, so it wasn't a mag issue, I don't believe. It was just the fact that this gun needs to go ahead and break on in and get everything loosened up before it starts to function properly, and it did start to run pretty well after I turned off the camera and figured out the few little things there and went ahead and fired some more rounds and everything started loosening up. It did cycle just fine. But now I will say the biggest issue I did end up having with this, we're going to go ahead and take the slide off of this, and that was going to be, I started getting light primer strikes, and I did have that issue with the 17L originally, and that is why I ended up putting a longer striker in it with a or it's lightened, to go ahead and eliminate that problem they had with it. And that's what I was thinking was happening with this one, but really what ended up being the problem here is our Leo Precision striker here. The tip of it was in the process of breaking off here, I believe, and that is why I feel like I was getting the light primer strikes towards the end there. I had in the last magazine, I had quite a few of them, so kind of disappointed that it didn't last no longer than that. I am going to try to reach out to them and see what they'll do about that, but either way, I'll more than likely go ahead and put the same striker in this that I did in the 17L. It currently has a factory Glock striker that was originally in the 17L in it now, just to go ahead and get it back together. And I guess so it does pay off to keep junk laying around. Everybody talks about having too much stuff laying around. You never have too many parts for your guns, so that paid off to have that left over to go ahead and put this back together. So let's go ahead and show you a little bit of wear that we've got, or the lack of wear. I'm gonna go ahead and throw the factory 19 recoil assembly off the side. There ain't nothing really fancy to look at there. Let's go ahead and get our thread protector off here, and we'll show you a little bit of wear, or the lack of wear, on these parts so far. Go ahead and put the thread protector on so I don't do anything stupid and mess up my threads while we're talking about this. And as you can see, this barrel essentially has absolutely no wear on it, which is pretty nice, seeing as if you've watched my video from the P320 barrel from AIM Surplus. After the first 80 rounds, there was hardly no finish left on that barrel at all, but again, I guess it really gets a pass being a $38 barrel versus a $150 barrel. So if this barrel had done that, I would have been quite a bit more disappointed. So I'm glad that it's holding up well, and that's actually pretty nice. So let's go ahead and move over to our slide here, and we are starting to get a little bit of wear right here where the hood runs at underneath the slide, which is a good thing in my opinion. It's starting to wear a little of that Cerakote off, going ahead and slicking everything up, kind of breaking in. You also have that right here around the back of the slide here, and right here where your slide goes up and down, it's starting to go ahead and wear in as well, which is also, like I said, a good thing. Go ahead and breaking in and everything smoothing out. The slide rails, you can see a little bit inside of them, but they really look about the same as they did when I first put it together. So that's going to take a little bit more shooting to get broke in. But other than that, I don't see anything that's concerning under here. Everything does feel, or seem to be functioning nicely with each other. So let's go ahead and get into the slide here. We'll go ahead and show you that you're starting to get a little bit of finish wear on your slide rails, which is not unexpected. It is metal running over the top of it, so it's going to happen. So everything is starting to break in and smooth out, so that is nice. And I will say that I originally said I was only going to make this a 2-part series in the first video there, but I do believe I'm going to go ahead and make a third video. In the third video, I'm going to go ahead and show it with the mag well on it, with the DPM recoil system in it, with the upgraded safety plunger in it and everything, and go ahead and just show the gun after I get everything working properly, just to show what it's actually supposed to be. And so if you're interested in seeing that, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and that's really all I had for you today. Okay, if you made it this far, I just want to say thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and share. If you're looking for more FunNGun right now, you can click one of the 2 recommended videos there. If you're looking for more FunNGun later, you can go ahead and click that there subscribe button. I sure would appreciate it. And if you're finding me from Facebook, go ahead and click that open app button at the top to make all that a lot easier, and I'll see you next time.